Welcome to More Than a Mission, a podcast where we explore what it looks like to discern God's calling to live an active, intentional life of sharing the gospel. Each week, we talk about the way God is moving in our lives, around the world, and everywhere in between, as well as how God's call to missions may apply to your life. Ready to explore your calling? Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the More Than a Mission podcast. My name is Micah, and I'm joined, as always, by Andrew Carlberg.
How you doing? Addison gave away my name last time.
And Zaya Henderson.
How you doing, guys?
We have two very special guests joining us again tonight, Christian and Robin MacKinnon.
Hi guys. Hello.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. Christian and Robin are very close with Andrew, or as they know him, Carl. So feel free to call Andrew Carl because we just recorded with Addison and Katrina and they did it, and I'm trying to get the train rolling. He's been known by Andrew in our group, but I love that y'all call him Carl.
Hey, you know, Robin and Christian are actually the two who have held out the longest. They've honestly called me Andrew the whole time.
It is true.
Well, shoot.
But we can switch over tonight.
If you want us to switch, we can do that.
Do whatever makes you comfortable. So Andrew, do you want to let us know how you met Robin and Christian?
Yeah, that could be a really long story. We'll share the brief version of that. Is I have known them almost 3 years now. October would be 3 years. I actually met them, ironically enough. Our last episode was Addison and Katrina. I technically met them at Addison and Katrina's wedding for the first time, although all I did was introduce their daughter, Maddie, to come up and sing. And then the next week I was at church. The very long story short is I had a vision about that entailed like worship happening in multiple languages. And so the following Sunday after that wedding, I was sitting in church and had no idea who, I like recognized them from the wedding, but they were sitting right behind me. And we're in the middle of worship, and out of nowhere, I hear someone start singing in Spanish, and I turn around, and it's their daughter, Maddie, who had been leading worship at the wedding. And so I was like, that's interesting. Have a dream about all this multiple language stuff. That was very much like part of it was helping, like a vision to start these worship nights in the city of Indianapolis. And so I was like, should probably pursue that. So I went to their house that night we call them missional communities, basically a house church kind of vibe. And pretty immediately, they have become, to this point, very much a second family to me. I'm literally living at their house right now as we go to training camp. And so they have become very near and dear. I've helped lead the MC house church with them and got to serve alongside of them in quite a bit of ministry. And I would tell you that they are a family I have never met a family that has the ability to instantly welcome and make people feel loved and known so quickly and so easily and so sacrificially, to the point where their home is constantly open. And it's just I don't care what it costs us. Our mission is to simply make every single person who walks in this house know that they are loved. And so it's really inspiring to watch them just walk through life. Even the simple thing, I think such a beautiful, simple truth that I see them live out in actually developing community is I'm always welcome here, but I'm welcome in the mess. It's never just, hey, we're gonna put on a show. It's hey, you're coming over. Also, we're all leaving, and you're 8-year-old girl from Honduras will be here, and our 10-year-old son will be here. Figure it out. So I've just seen so much beauty in them, welcoming people to just walk life with them, as opposed to there can be we're going to welcome people in, but we're going to put on a show for a few hours. I've just seen them live so authentically in their welcoming, I think, is the thing that has stood out to me the most. And so, yeah, going on 3 years now. I've tutored their kids. They've very much been a second family to me here, and I love them to death.
We feel the same. Those words are too kind for us, truthfully, but yes, we are very blessed.
Well, I can definitely attest to everything Andrew just said. I had heard a lot about the two of you from Andrew and just getting to know him. And then it was such a blessing to be able to meet the both of you. Gosh, what was that, like a month ago already?
Mhm.
Yeah, a little over.
Crazy. But for sure, one of the most welcoming families that I've ever met. And even just in that short, like 2 or 3 hours that I was able to spend at your guys' house, it was incredible.
We want you to come back. And Zaya, you're invited too.
You got to come next time.
Yes.
Cool. Thank you.
So Robin and Christian, I would love to know a little bit more about you guys. So could you tell us a little bit about what you all are doing right now, whether that be work, church, house church, all of the above?
Yes.
I think first of all, maybe just bounce back and forth. I think first of all, we carry the title missionary pretty close to our hearts. And I think that is something that kind of guides, our thoughts, how we spend our time, whether it's at work or home or at church, or churches coming into our home. So I have a corporate job, and I kind of call them my support for our mission work. We have 5 kids, 1 in college, and 2 in high school, 1 junior high, and 1 fourth grader. And so that keeps us hopping. And we do a lot of work in the church. We do coaching and training, leadership development as well. I don't know, I'm sure I missed some things.
No, I think that's good. We do lead a missional community, as Andrew said, which is like a small group or a house church. And our heartbeat really is for the vulnerable. So we really ask the Lord to break our hearts for the things that break his. And that has led us to being able to care for children in our home through a few different organizations, as well as we work most Saturdays to furnish homes for people who have previously been experiencing homelessness. And so we've got some different ministries that we feel really passionate about being connected to. But I completely agree with Christian. All of that is just a part of us feeling like our lives are called to be on mission, right? Regardless of, some people say, oh, like I'm a missionary in the marketplace, or I'm a missionary, or what. We just think you're a child of God. So like whatever your title is, there's just this expectation of who you are based on that identity. And we really try to keep that present. We do it very imperfectly, but we do try to keep that right before us all the time, to understand what's our identity and then allow that to drive our actions.
Yeah. I think specifically the area of, being a missionary. You think of a missionary and you think of being overseas, and we have lived overseas before, and we had kind of an Abraham call back to the U.S. It's not something that we wanted to do. And from that time forward, back in 2009, we really have been praying, Lord, kick us back out. We're ready to go. And that hasn't happened. But what has happened is that the nations have kind of come into our home. We've had, 11 kids, refugee kids, 10 or 11 refugee kids over the past 12 months live in our home for short or longer periods of time. And we're called to look after the orphan, look after the widow. And the modern day orphan, the modern day widow are the poor, the homeless, the refugee. And, I think, when you think about the Great Commission, that is a commission. It's not the Great Suggestion. And that's something that really does govern, I guess, how we interact with this world that we're in.
Yeah, and so you touched on, spoiler alert, Mexico. But so I would love for y'all to just share, like, this could be a longer story, but like how you met and then how you ended up going in the first place to Mexico.
So you want like our marriage story?
Correct.
Oh, wow. Now you're going way back. Our 25th wedding anniversary. is next summer.
Mhm.
So we're going to go back 25 plus
It's been
years.
a minute. We met, so brief story, we met while we worked in Washington, D.C. during college. So I'm from California, Christian's from Indiana, and we weren't there for political purposes. We were there leading high school conferences for students who would fly out to DC, receive leadership training, and they also got to engage in the civic process. And so we served as counselors for the first year, directors for the second year, and fell in love. And we dated for maybe 6 weeks. Like we were tight friends, dated for 6 weeks, got engaged, and we were married 10 months later. So that was, yes, 24 years ago. And our path took us to Ohio for a year, and then here to Indiana, which is where Christian's from, for several years. And then I'll start this kind of the mission call story. So I did not grow up in a Christian home. I didn't grow up going to church. I mean, I had heard of Jesus, and certainly I had friends who went to church, but my faith journey really started when I was in college, and then I was really well discipled by Christian, and then our initial church in Ohio, our church here in Indiana. And just as we grew in the Lord, our hearts just burned just to be completely sold out for him, like for him to have it all, for him to be the only thing, not like, not the main thing, just the only thing. And we began serving in our local church, began teaching Bible studies, sharing the gospel with people. The Lord, was gracious enough to use us to really help guide people to him. And we just had a really a thriving ministry really happening right where we lived. And we had one small child, Madeline, was our first. She was a few years old, and I'll never forget, I was pregnant with Joshua, and I went to a dinner that was like a fundraiser / informational meeting about an organization that works with orphans in Russia, Ukraine, Africa. Mm-hmm. And I was so fired up. I was like, this is a yes for sure, except that I was going to have a baby. And so I came home. Christian wasn't able to go with me, and I brought the application. I was like, you got to go. Like this, you have to go. And Christian, interestingly, had studied Russian in college, had lived a summer in Ukraine. So he kind of had a heart tie there anyways. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like a big stretch to convince you to go, right? Yeah. So Christian filled out the application, and he made plans to go. And we were super stoked. We had really just super cool people within our church that were wanting to help fund him so that he could go. And he was going to go in the summer. Our son Joshua was born in mid-April. So he was a few months old, and Christian started to get really sick, like to feel really bad. It was actually May. He was just about a month old when this happened. And was just in tons of pain one night, and actually had to drive himself, because I had these two babies, drive himself to the emergency room. And while there, they thought he had kidney stones. It turned out not to be that. It turned out to be that he had a really serious issue with his kidney. And so obviously you shouldn't go to Russia when you have a really serious issue with kidney. He needed surgery. It was a big deal. So that trip got removed from the table until.
Yeah, and so backtrack maybe about a month prior to us pulling out of that trip, or me pulling out of the trip. We had raised funds, and I had one of the funders for the trip was also somebody that really discipled me along the way. And I remember going to him early on saying, hey, I think I feel led by the Lord to be on this trip. In fact, I'm pretty sure I do. And the Lord just keeps breaking my heart for this. And he said, fantastic. I'll definitely sign up. What do you need? And he talked about the why. He talked about, mission service. He shared several stories about some Old Testament prophets, specifically Elisha. And I remember just walking away from that really feeling peace. But then, so fast forward a month, later, this happens with my kidney. Doctors say you're crazy to go to Russia. I think maybe you're right. That is crazy. So I went back to my donors, and this is probably about maybe a week to 10 days before the trip. And I remember telling everybody, hey, this is what's happening. In fact, my surgery was going to be on the day we flew out, right? And like everyone was saying, yeah, I'm so glad that you caught this now. It would be awful to be in Russia and have this happen. I can't imagine. And I remember getting back around to this guy who was discipling me through this, my mentor. And he said, I thought you said you were called by God to be on this trip. And I said, yeah, but my kidney is bad and it needs surgery. He said, I thought you were called by God to be on this trip. And I said, I've got an appointment with a doctor to go under the knife on August 18th of that year. And he said, well, you can schedule an appointment with man anytime, but you cannot reschedule an appointment with God. And I remember, I can still feel it, like just this feeling of like, just this rush of peace, but also anxiety at the same time. It's hard to describe. It's just Holy Spirit filled, that him saying, Christian, just put your trust in me. I've got it. I have called you to be on this trip. And so I remember calling back to the agency, and they said, and I told them, I said, hey, I'm actually going to reverse the decision. I actually want to be on this. And they said, okay, well, we've got like maybe 5 days left. And we have to get a visa. We have to get a plane ticket because we canceled your ticket. You have to get vaccinations. Like, there's a few miracles that are going to need to happen. And, I'm thinking, okay, Lord, you're going to have to really move. Well, the Lord did move. And I was on a plane on August 18th and was flying to Russia. And I remember on that trip thinking and feeling as well, because I had been in a little bit of pain all up until this point. My pain for those 3 weeks or 2.5 weeks, completely 100% gone. Felt completely normal and healthy.
So this was 17 years ago. So there was no smartphone. We didn't have FaceTime.
No cell phones.
We weren't doing Zoom. So I just didn't know. I didn't know how. We had no contact. I didn't know how he was. I didn't know what was going on. But when I remember going to the airport to pick him up when he landed, and I had at this point like a 4-month-old baby and a 2-year-old in tow, and he just, the first thing he said to me was, I have heard the Lord call us into full-time ministry. And I was like, okay. So we began just praying about what that was. This would be August. And we had just purchased an old house, like a sweet, sweet, sweet old house, but that you've got to do a lot to make it even sweeter. So we were putting some money into this house. Bit of a money pit. We were putting some money in this house, and we were, we had our 2 babies, and we still had to deal with this kidney thing. And then we're thinking full-time ministry. Well, the Lord opened up right away several opportunities for Christian to serve in full-time ministry in our city in Indiana. And that seemed to just make sense to me. Like, I had a large women's Bible study I was leading. We had a lot of really active ministry. And so I was like, yes, Lord, as long as it's just right here and not a lot else has to change. And Christian was really like, yes, Lord, just yes, Lord, period. So Christian went back to the doctor and rescheduled his surgery. They went in, this was probably October, and things actually were way worse than they thought they were. So they didn't do anything then, but they rescheduled a surgery for Christmas Eve to completely remove his kidney. And so they did that. And I remember sitting in the hospital room that night, and he was asleep. And we had been talking with different people about, different ministries locally. We just didn't find peace at all in them. And so I'm sitting there in the hospital room and I'm praying, And I remember having this overwhelming feeling of what if we miss God's best for us because I'm boxing him in? Like, I'm boxing God in. I'm telling him, yes, but only to these things. And it was like my heart broke in that moment. And I was able just to say, yes, Lord, yes to whatever it is that you have for us. And the Lord moved really, really quickly then. Christian recovered. We began to just pray. I was mentioned I was leading a Bible study that couldn't meet at the church for this particular week. So we met in these people's house, and this woman's house, she lived on a missionary complex. And the top floor of her house was where she lived. The bottom floor was apartments for missionaries coming off the field to stay. And I was setting up in her area, and someone came upstairs and just needed a pencil and introduced themselves to me and told me, this lady, we struck up a conversation. She tells me she and her husband have just left the field in Mexico to care for aging parents, and how they desperately needed people in Mexico. I was like, okay. Well, I came home and I said to Christian, what if God's calling us to Mexico? And I don't know why, but then all of a sudden Christian was like, no, I don't think so. And I was like, are you sure? Because these people are here in town and they can meet with us and talk to us. He's like, no, I just don't think that's it. And I was like, okay. So we didn't meet with them. And then God just like chased us in these crazy ways to make it super clear that he intended for us to explore this Mexico option. And we decided, okay, we start calling the mission agency. We try and get a hold of that couple. We're looking for information, and it is like crickets. Like, we get nothing. Nobody can help us. No one's on the field. No one's available. Not only are they like not helpful, it's like they're unhelpful. Like, they're almost like putting barriers in front of us. So
it seemed like I thought you wanted missionaries on the field, but we can't get a hold of you.
Yeah, we were like, what is going on? So I'll never forget, on a Saturday night, we got on our knees and we prayed. We were like, Lord, we think you are closing this door. And if you are, cool. But if you're not, would you just make that super obvious? Because we're frustrated and we don't know what's going on. So we were part of a church plant at that time that was meeting in a tiny room at the very top of a mega church. Like, they were giving us space. We could do like our little church plant. And
like, you had to go through like the hamster hallways to get to this
like
place.
Like a big huge mega church, like, I don't know, like there's like 5 diagrams for each wing. So we're up in our little area. There's like 40 of us, and we're doing church, we're doing our thing. And Christian, there's a couple visiting, which is obvious when you've got a little house church plant, and older couple behind us. Christian notices that they've got a Spanish Bible. So at the end of service, he turns around. I went to go get my kids from the nursery. He turns around and he talks to them. Turns out, of course, they are missionaries from Mexico with the agency we've been trying to contact. They heard about this church plant and wanted to check it out. They just happened to have the whole day free. And they were so excited to come to our house and sit and talk with us. And it was like the Lord just opened floodgates for us. They were so good to us, to explain things. They encouraged us to do a vision trip, which we did do. And I know this is such a long story, but it's so good I gotta tell it. So we go on this vision trip. My good friends watch our 2 babies, right? We get there. I'm telling you, we're in Mexico City. It is insane. It is, there's scorpions in my bed. We're pulled over by the police like 3 times. I'm like sick half the time. It was crazy. And I'm like, oh, well, I certainly hear the Lord on this one. Like, I hear you loud and clear, Lord. That's a no. So we get on the plane and we're flying home. And I'm like, so what are you thinking? And Christian's like, well, here's the deal. I think I've heard the Lord on this, but I think we shouldn't talk about it. I think we should just pray about it. And then let's just see how the Lord leads us in unity. And I'm like, yep. Sounds good. Like, you let me know when you're ready, because I know that this is a no. And we get home and we're talking with some friends who were very discouraging, like believers, right? Who are like, you definitely, what's wrong with you people to even consider this? You've got small children and no way, and that's dangerous, and don't you know about kidnappings? And I'm like, oh yeah, like preach, right? So we're just, in that situation. And then my accountability partner calls me, tell me what's going on. And I tell her, and her husband happened to work for the mission agency. And she's like, broke the accountability rule, told her husband what I'm talking about in accountability. He calls me up and he says, Yeah. So I want you to come to our mission agency. We have chapel 3 times a week. And I don't care when you want to come, but you should be in a room filled with people excited about missions. Just come. And so I'm like, yes, I will. And so a few weeks later, I picked a date. I go, and I don't know. I mean, Kurt meets me in the parking lot. He's like, I don't even know who's speaking today, but I know you're going to be encouraged. I was like, okay, we go in, I sit down. This guy stands up and he's like, welcome everybody. I'm super excited to talk to you all today about my recent visit to Mexico. And then he like shows these slides of all the places we visited, the people that we met, and my heart just breaks. And I got a hold of Christian. I'm like, we're going to Mexico, aren't we? And he was like, yeah, we're going to Mexico. And so it was like speed lightning at that point. Some friends called us and they're like, what are you guys deciding? And we're like, we're going to Mexico. What are you going to do with your house? We're going to sell it. Great, we'll come tonight and look at it. They're like looking at it. They're like, you tell us how much you want, we'll buy it. We never put a sign in the yard. And it was like, we could have 10 hours of podcast of recounting the miracles that the Lord worked in that season for us.
I remember asking the Lord just for confirmation, right, that the decision was right. And I said, I remember vividly praying, Lord, if you could just like give us some confirmation, like, can you do it just once a week, right? And this is how good God is. It wasn't once a week. It was every single day. I think I counted like 49 straight days of confirmation.
It was crazy, crazy stuff. And so then all that to say, we landed in Mexico, and we found ourselves pregnant in that journey. So when we actually left and arrived in Mexico, we had a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 6-month-old. And then we served in Mexico for 4 years. And it was completely awesome.
Yeah. I think some of the things that it changed in me was just the idea you're going there to go and serve and bring this nation to Christ. And the first thing that happens is actually God bringing yourself closer to him.
Mm-hmm.
That happens first, always. And that's just, it's going to happen, whether it's a short or a long-term experience. We did sign up for just 2 years, and every year the Lord just kept reconfirming, stay here. And so we were there for 4. I would also say this, that, our plans, we make plans, and the Lord has greater plans. I remember going there we taught English, and I thought, gosh, English, just teaching English, really, really, God, is that like, when am I going to get really out into the trenches and do church planting and evangelism and really just be in the trenches and leading people to the Lord on the street? And what's fascinating about that is we got to do leadership. We were in almost every single ministry that was even available on the field, one way, shape, or form. I led the field, and you would think, oh wow, you like led the field. Yes, I did. But I would say that the most fruitful time that we had was teaching English, little humble old English, and it was because we met in need. We became friends with many of these people. And when I look at the decisions for Christ that the Lord allowed us to be a part of, like 3/4 of them came in that first like 18 months with and through English. So the Lord can use anything he wants, anytime he wants.
Yes.
I'm going to pull an Andrew here. I have 2 things. Number one, I am so thankful for you sharing the journey to Mexico. I think it's really, really encouraging for people like us who are about to embark on, the world race and joining missions, and, just hearing how, like, all the different ways that God can confirm that calling. So it's really cool to hear all the different ways that he confirmed you guys in that calling. Number 2, I'm really glad you shared what you just shared about the teaching English part, because it goes so well with what we just heard last night from Addison and Katrina, in that, like, when you're like called to these missions, it's so important to focus on that one thing that you were called to, and God will put everything else in place. So I think it's really, really cool that both of you have shared that.
That's great. God might be up to something with that then.
For sure.
So could you then like explain, I mean, you kind of started, but like what ministry actually looked like for those 4 years while you were in Mexico, like what you guys were doing. And then I guess from there would be like, what actually then kicked you out of Mexico and brought you back to the US?
Mm-hmm. So I would say that what the Lord taught us, like we actually now will view our time in Mexico as our training for our mission work. And what I mean by that is God taught us so much about how to live missionally in Mexico. So I think in our heads, I mean, certainly we had ministry going before we left. And that's something we believe in a lot. Like we think, if you think you're going to get on a plane and land in another country, step off, and all of a sudden you're a missionary, it's not happening. If you're not doing it at home, you're not doing it overseas.
Yep.
Like you need to be living and doing your mission work where God has you planted. And so we had some of that going, but we also had like we've read those like stories of all these great missionaries, and we're like, okay, like here we go out on this big mission field. And what we learned was that mission work is about relationship. It's about inviting people into your life, into your family, into your home, into your mess. It's about it, and it's breaking bread together. So yes, like we would, this is a typical missionary thing. You've like make like a missionary newsletter, like, hey, here's, pictures of whatever highlights are happening. And really what mission work is, it's just loving people really big. And that's what God taught us. And it was a really good place for us to learn it, because Latin cultures, Mexican people are completely people-centered, not project-centered. And so I think the Lord wanted us to get that big time, that this isn't about what projects getting accomplished or what we could, there was this camp for 2 weeks where this many people accepted this Lord. Like, what's a good snippet for the newsletter? It was about really building relationships with people so that they could trust that you were bringing the gospel message to them, right? Now, there were certainly tasks that we did that weren't relational or that needed to happen, that the Lord also taught us to do really faithfully, and to trust that this was a training ground for our own heart. So there were some building projects. There were some things that were short term, where like relationship wasn't able to be developed over a length of time. And he really taught us to be just so fully present in those. And so we did everything from, Christian mentioned, teaching English, church planting, street kid ministry was a huge piece of what we did, started moms groups, and everything and anything in between, which is kind of, I think, the story of missionaries, right? You go and you've already said yes. So it's just whatever the task is in front of you, you do it as though you're doing it unto the Lord. Mm-hmm. And that was a real joy for us. You also learn about yourself and what things you love and what things you don't love. So Christian talked about he had to step in to lead the field. Like our field leader accepted a position at stateside with our headquarters. Christian stepped into leading the field, and he learned quickly, like, his joy is on the front lines. Lots of meetings and lots of administration. Someone needs to do it. And the Lord gifts people in that. But he was like, put me on the front lines, please. Like, let me talk to someone directly about the gospel. And so we got to figure out kind of where our gifting was. And that was really important for us. And we purposed, so we went for 2 years. We wound up staying for 4. We had another child born in Mexico. So 4 children now. And Christian was asked to renew as field leader. And so that would have been a 3-year commitment. Mm-hmm. And we were praying about that. And again, kind of separately, just wanting to hear the Lord, each of us, and then come together. I believe, definitely if in a marriage situation, we know that God works for unity, and he works for order. So he's not a God of confusion, right? So we just wanted to hear him and then come together. And we both clearly heard the Lord call us home, like clearly. Now, we had the best mission experience. We had a really cool team. We loved our work. We had deep friendships. We were rooted. It was awesome. Funding was no problem. Like the Lord brought our funding in. Like it's just all those things you kind of hear that people go running from the mission field back home for. It just didn't apply to us. It was the voice of the Lord. As clear as he called us there, he called us home. And that was a challenge. I mean, we sobbed when we came home. We were sad, but we trusted the Lord with it for sure. So we moved home, and we were really intentional and purposed that, I mean, just like I said, we felt like God had taught us how to live missionally. And we heard David Platt speak once about, and this was our posture, that like your life's like a blank check. I know nobody uses checks anymore, but your life's like a blank check, and you're just like, here, Lord, like spend it. Here's my life, you spend it. And that's what we wanted. And so we joke sometimes now that we could probably write a way meatier and robust missionary letter now than we even could when we were there. But I love that Christian said the Lord is, we keep praying, like, kick us out, Lord, like we'll go. We would love to go back. But the Lord has been faithful to bring the nations to us. So he mentioned refugee kids. We've had foreign exchange students live with us. We have ministered in Spanish-speaking churches here. Like it's God, you know, one of Christian's mentors said to him when we were in the process, like we were praying over, where should we go? What should we do? Before we had this Mexico call. And he's like, here's the deal. God doesn't actually care where you are. He cares where your heart is. Like, where's your heart? Is it his? Mm-hmm. And we have seen that. We have seen him give us great joy in ministry in Indianapolis, just as he had in Mexico City.
Yeah, yeah. So some of the things that, you know, as we look back, you kind of wonder, okay, so why, Lord, did you bring us back? You know, we do see fruit in ministry now. We do see ministry that both of us separately or together or as a complete family are doing. And there have been countless ministries that we've been a part of, both in a Hispanic church, to a nursing home, to a broken down motel with, you know, people who were just kind of the least of these, as Jesus says, that were living there. And I would say probably the two big areas would just be our fifth child. We did meet him because we adopted, and that has been a pure joy. That is almost a missionary journey within itself, mm-hmm. and is another chapter of another book, or maybe a book by itself. Mm-hmm. And then also Robin's dad's health was failing, and so we were able to bring him into our home for a period of time and care for him. So we know that the Lord did bring us back for those reasons, but you know, there are probably a lot of other reasons we won't know on this side of heaven. Mm-hmm.
And we didn't know those things. We didn't know. My dad was fine when we lived in Mexico. We didn't move home because of that. Yeah. And we didn't have any intention of having additional children. And like, so, but it's really beautiful when you can just trust the Lord. It's like, so when my 10-year-old wakes up, he's not like nervous about what the day holds or what are we going to do, or he's just like, hey, Mom, like whatever I say, that's how it goes, right? Like, okay. And I'll say, we're going to the store. Okay. We're going here. Okay. And he just trusts me. Like he totally trusts me to plan his day and to take him. And I think that's what the Lord invites us to, is like, just trust me and I'll take you. But it was hard because when you leave the mission field, people are sad, and I get it. But like other missionaries were like, why? Like, what's going on? And
what happened? What was wrong?
What? Yeah.
Who offended who?
Is there intervention? What do we need? Our
None
mission agency was like, I mean, the rumors were crazy. People just, and people, I think you guys could experience this when you come back from World Race, right? Like for lots of people, they're probably thinking, oh, this is like your buffet table. Like you're going to go test it all out and then see which thing you want for dinner, right? Like this,
Mhm.
and so there's going to be some expectation, I think, of, oh, you're going to go choose someplace now where you're going to plant long term, and maybe, but maybe not. I mean, maybe God has just some training in it for you. Maybe God has you, scheduled to meet somebody in some country, and because that's for their life trajectory. So it's like believing that God is still good and that you're still useful, even if your title isn't full-time ministry.
Yeah, I think it's a testimony to God's sovereignty when you think about, first of all, He is sovereign, and he if we make a wrong decision, it's, the Lord is not up there on His throne wondering, oh no, they made a wrong choice. Now what do I do? God is sovereign, and and what he wills happens.
Mm-hmm.
And so that has given us great peace about being in ministry, and I'm sure we've made mistakes along the way, but we rest in God's sovereignty in it. Yeah,
That's so good. So good. So now I have to ask, when you heard the Lord calling you back home from Mexico, was it just a complete like, hey, you're going home, trust me, I got this? Or was it like, hey, I got this job lined up for you, Christian, I have a job lined up for you, Robin, like, here's your next opportunities? Or was it just go home, it'll work itself out?
yeah, that's a good question.
Yes, it was both.
Yeah, I think it was both as well. That would have been my answer too. I think the Lord was showing that provision. I think He knew that we needed to see, okay, well, is there a way? What is that way? And the Lord was gracious to us. Psalm 37, verse 4, a very important verse in our youngest son's life, in him coming to us, also was true then too, that He gives us what we delight, and He answers the prayers for those who delight in Him. And I think that that's something that we were asking along the way, and He did give us that peace. And He, in that provision, out of that provision, we are so grateful to the Lord, because it's allowed us to really truly be missional.
Mm-hmm. So it went like this. Okay, Lord, we hear you. We're coming back. What does that look like? We don't know. Okay, let's just keep praying about it. And then a supporter of ours that would call about every 2 months or 3 months called and was talking to Christian. He would just check in. How's it going? What's going on? And he said to Christian, hey, I don't know like what you guys are thinking or what's happening, but I have this job description on my desk, and the Lord just keeps telling me to contact you about it, like just over and over. And Christian was like, well, okay, God has told us that we're coming home, and so talk to me about it more. So that wound up being the job Christian took, and it's the company where he still works today. So what's super cool about that is the guy who contacted Christian was one of the guys that Christian was able to lead to the Lord and disciple before we ever left to the mission field. Mm-hmm. So it's like this like full circle, really, really cool. It's really cool.
It's just a God story.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm gonna one up here, Micah. I have 3 things this time. First, just like you guys are sharing about sovereignty, and I think the analogy that I love to use is to like think about like a little girl who's learning how to walk, right? And so like maybe the first time she walks, she takes a step and then she stumbles and she falls. Like the Father's response, like just like the idea of the freedom that we have in that sovereignty. Like so often I think it's really easy to think like, well, the Lord will like pick this one or this one, and it'll be obvious, like I have to do it or I can mess up. And so often it's just like, here's both. They're great. You have freedom. Choose. And it's like in the same way, the little girl falls, like the Father's response isn't like, oh, I'm writing you off. You don't know how to walk. Like you're a terrible daughter. Like it's to pick the daughter back up and just be like overjoyed to go through the process of walking with her. And so like, I just think that it's such a beautiful analogy of the like freedom that we are invited into in like being children of God. And then the other 2 things are kind of tied together. I would love to hear, one, I would love for y'all to share whatever the brief-ish version of Mason is, because I think it is a like miraculous testimony that I think would be really cool for you guys to share. And then with that, specifically like ministry back here in general, I'd love for you guys to share just like the vision and like maybe the mission statement that you have in that. But specifically, I think one of like the most beautiful things that I have seen in walking life with you guys that is really different than any like other family I've ever seen is the way that you choose to like parent with a missional focus. And so I would love for you to share like story of Mason and then like what like mission statement and vision looks like for ministry in general, but particularly like in raising your kids.
Hey everyone, Micah here. Because we had such a great conversation with Christian and Robin MacKinnon, our talk went a little long, so we're going to divide this week's episode into 2 parts. You've just finished part 1. Stay tuned for part 2 of this episode coming out later in the week. Thanks, guys.
We want to thank you for listening to More Than a Mission. For more information and to keep up with our ministries, follow us on social media at More Than a Mission Podcast or email us directly at morethanamission@outlook.com.